It's great to be here. Bloomberg has been very strongly associated with India at 75 and proud to be so, because we really believe in the vision that India at 75 has kind of drawn out. So gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to start off with you, Naushad. You have the task of taking over the reins of the CII in what is a tough year, because you have so much of global volatility. The economy is not shrugged off the problems of the past. So, I mean, from your vantage point, what is the year looking like?
So, I think from my vantage point, the year's looking okay. It's looking okay if one keeps a medium-term view of the Indian economy for different reasons. First, for India, we're clearly the fastest-growing large economy. This is something that we keep hearing. It's very true. That's very good news because being the fastest growing large economy means that we're adding that much more in the way of opportunity, that much more in the way of demand each year. And where our growth comes from is also very important. The big growth driver has tended to be domestic consumption. And domestic consumption in that sense is the factor, the variable that one has the greatest control over. It's the factor that we're least dependent, in a sense, on what happens internationally, least dependent on what happens with even global commodity prices or exchange rates or the oil price or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Chandrajit, you've been with the Prime Minister and the policymakers to a lot of international forums. The fact is that the world is perhaps far more bullish on India than we are. We get kind of swayed between euphoria and despondency, depending on which way the debate of the evening is going. But on the whole, for these youngsters coming out into the workspace, into corporate India, what's the picture looking like? And what is making you really optimistic?
So there are, and you were very right, Mini, that the world is looking at India with a lot of expectation. The world is looking at India to be that bright spot. The world is looking at India to be one which is going to be a game changer as one goes ahead. It wants to give India a lot of time. The best of people the best of brains that one talks to across the world, they say that you need to give India time. It's a $2.3 trillion economy, and for that economy to turn around, for that economy to do well, from a mess that we were in a few years back is a challenge. And so directionally, you are going right. And you have certain inherent strengths in India. And these 3 Ds, which our Prime Minister talks about, which actually resonates very well with the world. The D of democracy, of course, which is understood by all. The D of the demography, which is phenomenal today. And that demographic dividend that we have is, which really not only is something which is important for India, but it's important for the rest of the world, because people look at India to supply that manpower over a period of time. That also leads to the third point, which is this 1.25 billion people and the demand that it creates. So that demand that comes out of this 1.25 billion people is going to be phenomenal, and these are very strong points on India. And if we are able to channelize these 3 points in the right direction, India is a winner.
Over the last year and a half, you've got some great slogans around India. The Make in India, the Stand Up India, Startup India. And I think it captures the mood of aspiration. Rajan, you've been involved with India at 75 right from the inception. And at the time you started off, the world looked different. There were far more challenges. What is the mandate now, especially when there's so much of focus on India and there is so much of groundswell around India?
No, absolutely. And thanks for raising that aspiration thing, because I think we're sitting in a room where everybody sitting here has got an aspiration that is, definitely something which is far larger than what even they can imagine or expect to achieve. And I think that is something that we found even in 2007 when CII, Young Indians and BCG went across the country, and we said, what's that common link that connects Indians, across all, whether it's the housewife or the farmer or the young student or the thing, and the need for a better livelihood for themselves, the next generation, the opportunity to be able to, become effective and able to kind of bring out whatever is best in a person actually came out very, very strongly. And we even felt that it was as strong as the need for freedom in the 30s and 40s. I mean, that was the strength with which that aspiration connected. And if I were to look at that same aspiration thing today, I think it's only been, enriched, and I think it's been enhanced. Because when you look at technology, you look at information that is available, you look at the ability for people to relate to what you can achieve potentially, I think aspirations are only going to keep rising. And I think that's really where we as India really need to be very careful on how we tread this journey. And I think the India at 75 kind of value proposition of entrepreneurial transformation, low resources, but high aspirations, and being able to bridge that gap through innovation, through technology, through entrepreneurship, is just very exciting.
That also brings to the fore the importance of skilling, Chandrajit. Because at the end of the day, I think the important aspect is to get everybody to go to the next level and the next level so that they pick up families with them. How are you getting CII member companies to really adopt and be ambassadors for skilling on the ground?
So the skills landscape is very interesting, and we started working on the skills landscape when India became 60. And we said that it's not good for us to celebrate India at 60, the 60 years which has gone by, but look at the next 15 years and start talking about an India at 75. And when we started talking about India at 75, the first challenge that came to our mind was the skills landscape. And since then, we have been working on skills, involving industry on skills, but we really celebrated when the government started also focusing on skills and built institutions which were very important, governmental institutions which were facilitating industry to participate in the skills landscape. Now, what's happening in skills, the challenge is, with the changing paradigm of technology, with the change, there is going to be a lot of jobs which are going to move. You are not going to have the traditional jobs that one knew as, so that's going to be a huge challenge. But that doesn't mean that that job opportunities are going to come down, because there will be a new set of jobs that will come up. And when you get a new set of jobs that will come up, more you replace, it'll actually get replaced by a new set of jobs. And we need to look at the future. We talk about driverless cars, but all these new technologies will bring in new type of jobs for people. And that's the type of setting that we have to work for from the industry. And that's what we are doing. We are trying to involve industry to more and more private sector to come in terms of understanding what should be the curriculums be like in both vocational training institutes or in other institutes of higher education. And private sector playing a much more closer role in terms of framing the syllabus, in seeing to it how it can cater to the job market for tomorrow.
Rajan, the reason I raised skilling was the fact that I think at India at 22, one of the big challenges is going to be skilling the youngsters who are coming out of colleges. And when I started the conversation, I said everybody over here is really privileged because they have had access to great education. Now, that remains one of the biggest problems. What are the innovative ways in addressing that? Getting people job ready for work at different levels. And what is your own insight from the work that you've done at India at 75?
No, I think, this is a very relevant, subject and a question. And I think, it can go from any extreme, from looking at small changes to things which are very, very drastic. And I think drastic changes really starting from there is really looking at the way education is imparted in, Asian countries, particularly in India, where first 20 years of your life is all that you're doing is you're studying. And is there a way to look at it? Because one feels that after you have studied, you have achieved, and now you're going to continue with that skill or that career, for a longer time. And that's really the way we educate people. If a few years down the road, or maybe next decade, we want Asia and India to be in a position of leadership, we have to rethink our education institutions, right? Sure. We need to create, and that's what America did extremely well, right? The foundations and who supported it. How did business actually create those institutions, the R&D, etc., to be able to attract it. So I think moving from simple, experiments to very drastic changes, I think this journey of how India is going to get there, to your question of 2022, one thing is clear, it cannot get there in ways that have been done before. And
Absolutely.
we have to find newer ways.
And the world is changing fast. I mean, the difference
Absolutely.
between our universities and international centers of learning and research is hugely different. And I think that's where a lot of change is required. Naushad, I'm going to ask you to, if you were to give advice to the students over here, so how important is skilling yourself for the changing world, and what are companies looking for when they are going out and hiring?
Okay. So it depends on what one is hiring for and for which position. So if I'm hiring a security guard, I want someone who can function as an effective security guard day one. If I'm hiring a cook in the canteen, I want someone who can cook, reasonably well day one. If I'm hiring an engineer, I'm not necessarily looking for her or him to do an effective job day one and to be able to understand the domain well enough day one. I'm instead hiring the individual for their learning capabilities, for their ability to think, for their ability to actually conceptualize a problem for themselves, and then to come up with their own answer. So in terms of advice, the advice, this is gratuitous advice. And I would say, worry about the quality of the education that you're getting. Don't worry about its relevance to later careers. Because all of you as professionals who are going out, very often one of the complaints that we hear of higher education is that higher education is not relevant. It's not training people to do the specific jobs that they're going to go away and immediately do. I think that is a wrong allegation. I don't think that's the purpose of higher education. I think the purpose of higher education is actually to learn how to think, to learn how to solve problems that have not yet been articulated. And if that's the purpose of higher education, then that's what you should be worrying about. You should be worrying about your own thinking styles. Worry about new challenges.
Sure.
So,
open your mind.
Yeah, open your mind. And
build the capacity of your mind.
Open your mind.
Important.
Yeah, exactly. Open your mind to new experiences. Take courses in fields. Read stuff that has nothing to do with your field. Read things that you disagree with. That's even more challenging and tough to do.
Fair enough. So we've set the tone for India at 22 and the dream of India over there and how we can be a developed country. Well, developed, I'm not too sure because that's another debatable point, but we should be on the path to becoming a developed country. So one of the important pillars is going to be skilling, where every individual, no matter which layer one is from, actually rises to the next level and perhaps develops intellectually to be able to take far bigger challenges, because India needs people who take far bigger challenges. So that's one piece, Chandrajit. What are the other pillars that you would like to stress on to really be able to achieve that target?
So there are actually many, as you very rightly said. Developed is an aspiration that we are showing. But if we really need to move towards that direction, really want to get back to the first comment that I made, and I really want to really get down from there and get onto the social aspect once again. The entire fabric of our education space needs to be well defined. It's not just only skills, but we need to go to education, primary education, reaching education down at the village level. I think our aspirations over there needs to be stronger. We need to see to it that we are able to reach it, the best quality education. We need to see many more of our colleges in the best ranks in the world. We need to seriously introspect as to why we are not there in the top 100 or the top 50, why our numbers are not there. And we need to go towards that. That's going to be a very important part to see a developed India. The second aspect within education, I would see the girl child. And I think that's going to be the opportunities that and it's just is the girl child is important, but what the point that I'm really trying to make is opportunities. Is there opportunity of education for all?
Absolutely. Rajan, I want you to touch upon what are the 2-3 pillars that you think are important, and also touch upon the issue of volunteerism. I think we are many Indias. I think we are as developed as Manhattan in pockets and as bad as sub-Saharan Africa. And I think the divisions within is something which is a big challenge for India at 75. How do you get people together at a common platform and lift people out of abject poverty? How important is volunteerism, and how have you seen companies participate in this?
No. I think, the cornerstone of that change in India that we talk of, I think very, very clearly emanates in the, in the people of India. And I think it comes across, from people of all walks of life. And I think the National Volunteering Grid, which is a technology platform that India at 75 has led, actually a lot of the thinking that has gone into the MyGov platform of the government, which is actually encouraging people to come volunteer and participate in nation building activities, has emanated, a lot from India at 75. The other thing we find in India is that, somewhere at the core, we are givers. Indians by nature, somewhere we have that tendency to be able to give. So our thing is, what would you like to give? Time, skills, money. Let's create an opportunity for us to be able to give all of that. Time is just, okay, I want to give an hour a week, I'm available, what can we do? Skill is really something which is, I think, far more valuable. And towards that end, I think India at 75 has done a lot around the pro bono movement. We worked with Taproot Foundation in the US and actually have tried to quantify the value of what corporate employees who have certain skills can give to nation building. And we've quantified the ambition of that value to be something like $10 billion over the next 7 years. Now, just in comparison, the US, has about $180 billion of valuable volunteering activity every year, which is a few percentage points of GDP. And over the last 10 years, if one were to quantify that value, it was over $1 trillion.
Let's get some ideas from the audience as well, from the students, on what they think are the big challenges and the big opportunities to really achieve the goals that we have to achieve at 75.
Two questions I have. One is regarding we spoke about education, we spoke about a little bit about society. So my idea was that we never spoke about the aspect of governance in particular as to the political will which we have right now in the government to change, right? Secondly, I feel that when in the idea is the mentality which is put forward as to the volunteerism, as to like when people say you want to look at the greater good, when you end up looking at the goal rather than the problem at which it is supposed to assess, and then you end up determining your track through that.
Okay, so you've got two questions. One, you're reflecting the skepticism and the cynicism about every Indian has about the political class, saying, are they committed to what we are talking about in that great vision? The second piece is that what is in it for me if I'm doing volunteerism, right? Many people are looking at self-interest and they don't really see a tangible result. So I think those are two pertinent questions, and who's going to take the political question?
The first one.
Okay, great.
I'll take the first one. The skepticism that you talked about, I wonder whether once you are in power, once you are in government, whether people change. That today, be it whatever political party that you are from, if you are in India, you are actually having a sort of a shared aspiration of taking your state to be in the top bracket.
The second question you had was really on, when I see volunteerism, can you take that, Rajan?
Sure. I think it depends on who is volunteering. And of course, like what we said, India is very inclusive in that process. And, we have found that the poor or the people who live in rural India, their volunteering efforts, and Indian government does a lot, right? So we have the Nehru Yuva Sangathan, NYKS, and NSS and all of them. And we find that amongst all of those volunteers, when they volunteer, they actually build very strong networks. It helps them improve their self-esteem significantly. When you have a cause attached to everything that you do, it just makes it far more meaningful.
Give us one idea from your end, You know, we keep talking about you being the future. I want an idea from your end.
Hi, so now that we've been talking about higher education and we have the CII facilitating the same, I have an idea. So how essentially Ivy League colleges and colleges outside India work and are like leading the tables is because professionals themselves come down to conduct lectures and
Sure.
hold activities. For example, Larry Page himself comes down to Stanford to conduct a management lecture. So now that we are CII and we can facilitate
Yeah.
a similar procedure in India
Naushad,
and make
next
it more
lecture is from
professional.
you.
So experts from our own experts from the industry is coming down to universities and taking lectures.
Great
and then,
idea. Wonderful. You've got the right people over here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you can catch them next time if they're not doing it. Yeah.
Good evening. So according to me, since we are speaking about education, one sad or rather the most biggest disadvantage of our education sector is the continuing reservation system or the discretionary quota which is continuing.
And you know, that is the reason why people go out to study, right? Because you don't
Exactly.
get...
That's
you
what
don't
I
get-
wanted to raise. Most of the overseas education is because half of the seats are reserved. How will the deserving candidates will get the higher quality education if half of the seats are reserved for the undeserving students?
Okay, this lady over here, yeah.
Good evening. My name is Kushangi Sivani, and I'm a second-year student from Symbiosis Law School. I believe that economic development cannot occur if the social aspects are not stable. So the idea here would be that to move on to economic ground, we need to solve out the problems at the social level at first. Focus should be on making that growth that we have more socially inclusive so that all layers of the society are included.
And I think one of the problems that we are facing as a country, and introspect on this, is that a lot of the social conflict is because of the lack of jobs and growth. Anything that you'd like to add to that?
In conclusion, my takeaway is I don't think there is there is any two ways about whether we are going to be a developed nation by 2022. It's how and what should be the structure of it. But I don't see a challenge of ours reaching that. And my concluding point is India has it all, but India needs to give opportunities.
I'm going to get Rajan and Naushad to give their one disruptive great idea for achieving the goal of India at 75. Rajan?
You know, I think the lawyer community is definitely one group that I think has the opportunity or the potential and the means and the ways to actually go and be successful, you know, there. And I strongly believe that, you know, if we are able to bring right leadership in place, values-based leadership, which is to me the cornerstone of the entire India that we are going to create, we'll get economic strength, we'll get technological vitality. But if we don't have governance, moral leadership, and all of those values imbibed in really what our country has stood for, I mean, I think our country really is, the foundation is the national values that we've had over years of development of this country. And I think if we can create an India based on that, I think we can create something very magnificent.
Wonderful.
So I think between participating in politics and moral leadership, both Chandrajit and Rajan have said it all. I'm just taking away the message that I got that I'm supposed to come and teach here.
Okay, great. So you've got a professor, you know, faculty, line, which is great. But you know, in conclusion, what I would like to say is that we've had a wonderful session over here. The ideas have been great, and I do hope we've converted every one of you to participate in this India at 75. And you know, I started by saying that you are all privileged, and with privilege comes responsibility. I hope you've got, you know, a lot of ideas from here. A lot of your own ideas have been crystallized, and I hope you give wings to all of that and be the change leaders. Thank you so much.